Had that bullet been 1 inch to the right, Donald Trump would not be the presidential candidate. Thomas Matthew Crooks, we know that he went to the shooting range. This shooting range was also frequented by federal law enforcement. We know that for the majority of the times that Thomas Matthew Crooks was going to that range, he was not going there alone. The corporate media has decided to completely take this story out of the cycle. People are sick of the talking head on the screen telling you whatever the corporate censors want you to hear, and they're starved for authenticity. The only response that I could think of was to put it all down on paper.
Why did you decide to do that, and what did you uncover?
When you're watching one of those shows, when you're watching one of those outlets, they don't exist to inform you. They exist to misinform you.
One thing if there's a misinformation story or a story suppressed, but like a search result and an individual customized piece, and then it's gone.
Their greatest power is story selection. In story selection, they can control what you talk about and what you don't talk about. And if they want to omit something, they can erase it completely. The book is Bulletproof: How a Shopman for Donald Trump Took Out Joe Biden. It is the first book written on the Trump assassination and the only book that comes out before the election. Wait a minute, if we do a book on this, every single time they write a hit piece about Bulletproof, every single time they attack Bulletproof, they are going to be forced to talk about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Do you make a stand and try to fight? Or do you sort of recess and do you run away? It's like the old adage about Vladimir Lenin: you may not care about politics, but politics cares about you.
Hey, I know investing in crypto is scary. It takes a real leap of faith because there are so many scams, rug pulls, and bad actors out there. It's a dangerous business, which is why 95% of people lose all their money. Well, that's why I created the London Real Investment Club, so you can access the hottest deals on the planet and use the crypto bull market to create the generational wealth that you deserve. Join my team of over 100 people from around the world that are making millions of dollars behind the scenes investing in blockchain, AI, Web3 games, DeFi, Bitcoin, and more. Don't miss out. Click the link below to book a call with one of my team now. But hurry, this bull market will end soon.
I know investing in crypto can be scary. That's why you gotta join the investment club. Pull the trigger. Let's do this.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Jack Posobiec, the author, political activist, and news correspondent. You are the host of Human Events Daily, a news show taking a factual and unfiltered look at how current events are impacting America. Previously, you served as an intelligence officer in the United States Navy with deployments on Guantanamo Bay and East Asia. You're the author of 5 books with a range of topics from the 2016 presidential election to political information warfare to the rise of Antifa. This year, you published 2 books, Unhumans: The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them, and Bulletproof: How a Shot Meant for Donald Trump Took Out Joe Biden, which offers a detailed investigation into the attempted assassination. Ultimately, you believe that November's election could be our last chance to save Western civilization. Jack, welcome to London Real.
Well, Brian, thank you so much. I really appreciate the intro. And wow, I whoever that guy was in the bio, I hope I can live up to his expectations. That's a high bar.
He's an impressive guy, so we'll jump into it. Look, Jack, you've said, quote, we have an election in 8 weeks that could determine the trajectory of Western civilization. You need to get active, leave everything on the field right now, unquote. Jack, do you think Americans are doing enough right now? Do you think they realize how important this is, or the next 50 some days are?
Honestly, no, I don't. I think that most Americans, by and large, look at this as another election. I think a lot of Americans right now keep in mind that we're going into the fall. There's a sports season. There's new movies coming out. I think a lot of people are checked out of the political process because, by and large, American mainstream media exists to keep people in the dark about what's actually going on in our political process and how it changes and alters not only our standard of living within the United States, but also America's position in the world. There are so many politicians, and by the way, you heard Kamala Harris at the debate stage, really adopting this new kind of mantle for the Democrat Party, an almost Bushian sort of mantle where she's evoking lines of Dick Cheney, bringing up John McCain, talking in these very neoconservative, neoliberal sort of perspectives, whereas President Trump in the debate was talking in a manner that I think is more reflective of reality, talking about how America's station in the world has irrevocably changed with the rise of the BRICS nations becoming this new block of states operating in a system which is in parallel to the G7 nations, and really coming at this crux point of determining what will America's role be in the future and what is America's role currently. Should America attempt to force global hegemony on the rest of the planet, or will America adopt a role of diplomacy? And by the way, I think we know which of the candidates is going for diplomacy and which of those would demand that level of hegemony, not just in terms of economic deals or sanctions, but also at the point of a bayonet.
You know, I'm watching from over here in London. I've been here over 20 years, but I mean, I'm originally from California. And, you know, it gets me a little anxious, and it's not the country I live in, because I know, at least I believe, that whoever is the next president of the United States for the next 4 years, it could make a real difference in the world, not just the economy, potential warfare. We're not that far from Ukraine, you know, or Israel for that matter. And so for me, I really feel it. But you know, I ran to be mayor of London twice, and I would bump into people a day or two before the election, and I realized for a lot of people, they don't think about it until the day or the day before. And I'm just wondering if you think that Americans will engage when this time comes. I guess we have mail-in ballots, so they're going to start voting as we speak now, very soon, right?
That's right. And there's a number of states. Actually, North Carolina was supposed to have their mail-in ballots already be sent out by this point in the election. However, because of the status of RFK having been previously on the ballot and then withdrawing from the ballot, those mail-in ballots have actually been delayed because there's legal proceedings now to have his name stripped. I believe the current printing was in the process of going out of the mail-in ballots when he actually pulled himself off. And of course, this becomes a huge issue for Democratic purposes, small d democracy there, because if he's not running, you want to make sure that his name is not on the ballot. Should someone inadvertently check it, or someone perhaps send the message that he is running. This has become the latest political fight in America, by the way, because to have someone so high profile, probably the most high profile third party candidate since Ross Perot in the 96 and the 92 elections, and that you have a situation here where his name could really throw some of these very close states. And we are looking at very close states, whether it be North Carolina, as the one I mentioned, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona. This really is by and large a 5-state election. And you could see perhaps less than 100,000 votes, potentially even less than 50,000 votes could actually swing the entire country.
Yeah, I've heard it comes down to 6 counties. I actually had Rudy Giuliani right here in this room a few weeks ago, and he was breaking down a lot of those details. We're definitely going to get to that. Yes. You mentioned Bobby. You know, I actually had Bobby on my show on May 4th, 2020, talking about, COVID and vaccines. And he's the guy that really set me straight on that whole process. He came back when he published his movie and book about Anthony Fauci, and now it's just incredible to see what he's done. What's your take on the fact that Kennedy, for the first time ever, is endorsing a Republican? We got Tulsi Gabbard now on the Trump, team, and at the same time, Dick Cheney is supporting Harris. It's just mind-boggling. What do you make of all this?
We are living through the greatest political realignment in the past 80 years. We're seeing alliances shift. We're seeing coalitions shift. We're seeing coalitions be destroyed and coalitions be rebuilt. The movement of what I would call the populists in from the Democrat Party into the Republican Party has now been mirrored by the movement of what I would call the security hawks or the collective West, for a better lack of a better term, the Atlanticists, the globalists. They've now moved from the Republican Party to the Democrat Party. And I attended both the RNC and the DNC this year, and you could see this on full display. That at the RNC, again, you heard these call outs. Now, Bobby hadn't endorsed yet, but it was sort of on the way because he had arrived there in Milwaukee at the time, and he was having discussions with President Trump. We thought he was going to come out, but he eventually came out about a week later. And then when you went to the DNC, you saw speeches from former CIA directors, former military officials. Dick Cheney comes on board afterwards, Liz Cheney. And again, it's this huge realignment whereby in one side wants to push this idea of Western global hegemony, push really through the DC London axis. And then the other side is pushing for what, for lack of a better term, is America first. And America first doesn't mean conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican. And so this is what's switching everything around. And America first, by the way, also means putting the citizens of your nation first when it comes to policy. And so when looking at one of these strategic alliances, whether it be NATO, whether it be the conduct of the G7 nations, whether it be EU, whether the relations between the EU and the United States, all of this then comes into question. Certainly, the Global Compact on Migration is something that's become a major flashpoint in the United States, and our refugee resettlement programs became a major flashpoint in the debate, and certainly as a firestorm has ensued after this, because again, that's something where Republicans and Democrats of one wing are in alignment, and Republicans and Democrats in another wing are in another alignment. What you really have is MAGA. MAGA, America First, has become a third party in American politics. It just so happens to be encapsulated within the Republican Party, yet I believe that it's broken out into the mainstream, and that's why you're seeing now Democrats like Bobby Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, independents like Elon Musk and David Sachs now coming on board with Donald Trump and with America First. J.D. Vance, also someone who was not a Trump supporter early on, now on board because they understand that this represents a totally new way forward of looking at policy as regards to America's standing and then America's relationship between itself and its citizens.
Jack, just a quick aside. What was the vibe like at the Democrat convention? Like, what is it? Because you just been to the Republican one. What did it feel like? What did you? I mean, you must have noticed kind of little things, obviously, besides who was on stage. I'm just curious because I don't know anybody that went to both.
It was really interesting. The RNC, just to paint the picture for you, had almost a carnival atmosphere. There were a lot of street events. There were vendors. You would walk around from building to building. And obviously there was the main hall where they had the speeches, but then there was another media center and different groups had different, myself and Charlie Kirk actually rented out this, we had a sort of Turning Point Action sports bar right across the street. And we had a public stage where we were doing events and shows and all sorts of things throughout the event. And my family came and they were playing cornhole. My little boys were there hanging out, having a good time, and just great street traffic, great interviews, really, really positive energy. At the DNC, there was none of that. At the DNC, it was high security. They had the hall. And then the minute you left the hall, this is in Chicago, the minute you left the hall, it was completely secured, fencing up everywhere. And you were told that you had to go on a bus and the bus would take you to the next place. There were no vendors. There was no street traffic. There was no one walking around. Everything was very, very scripted, very corporate, very controlled. And from television, you could see it looked like a very well put together production, and it certainly was, and it was very streamlined. But when you were there on the ground, you realized it was not organic. It was not organic at all. There was no sense of a grassroots atmosphere. There was no sense of people hanging out and networking. Also, by the way, as another example, At the RNC, if you had a pass to go into the building, if you're approved for that, then you could basically, there were different places people could sit, but you could find a seat, and there were lots of general open spaces where you could just go in and watch the proceedings. At the DNC, all of that was strictly controlled. So there were various levels of entry and various levels of security. So you could have a pass that would let you in the perimeter, but not in the building. Then you could have a pass that would let you in the building, but not within the actual seating area of the building. And then there were various passes as to which level of the seating, and then all the way up and down to the floor. And so again, just highly controlled, highly secure, highly scripted, highly corporate. That is how I viewed the DNC, whereas the RNC was just much more organic and had a lot more life to it.
And do you get dirty looks at the DNC?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There was one point where former Attorney General Eric Holder actually crossed past me. And so I was able to get up my phone and kind of get in his face a bit and say, why was it that you didn't vet Tim Walz? So Tim Walz has become the second vice presidential nominee, by the way, in the race. People seem to forget that we've switched candidates in the middle of the race on the Democrat side. The media seems to have forgotten about this, the way they've forgotten about Donald Trump taking a shot to the head in Butler, Pennsylvania on J13. And I asked him why was it that he didn't mention or he didn't vet Tim Walz. Now, his firm, Covington and Burling, Eric Holder's, was supposed to be in charge of the vetting for the Democrats. And there's so much just opposition that's come out and opposition research that's come out on Tim Walz. His lies about serving in war, his lies about being a combat veteran, his lies about his rank, I was surprised to even find this was live. Apparently, he even lied about using IVF. It turns out his children are not from IVF. And even though he's been telling people this for quite some time during his political career, which I can't imagine what that feels like to be one of those children and hear your own life be used like that and exploited for politics. So I went up to Eric Holder, and of course he starts screaming and cursing and sends the security after me and all that. And it was very fun. We had a good time.
I love it. You mentioned the debate earlier, and you have said, quote, Trump has just survived his second assassination attempt in one campaign. What did you see happen that night?
Well, it was an attempted political assassination that night. This wasn't an attempt at a debate. This wasn't an attempt at understanding what people were about or where they were coming from. President Trump would make a statement, and he'd be interjected 5 times, either from the opposing candidate or from one of the 2 debate moderators. This was a gang hit that was conducted on him, and it almost goes without saying that the opportunity for someone to hold a debate and to present their vision for a way forward for the country, for a way forward for, again, all of the issues that we've been speaking about here. Are we going to be headed towards global hegemony? Are we going to be headed towards World War III? This conflict between the G7 and BRICS, will it spill out into a hotter war, which is clearly the side that Kamala Harris is aligned on, versus an idea that nation states can go back to being a collection of nation states and hold this one-on-one diplomacy, which is something that Donald Trump has been standing for his entire political career, even before his political career, where he's talked about the not only the strength that comes from NATO, but also the potential threat that comes from NATO expanding into regions across its borders and abutting against other countries' borders. And so those are serious security concerns. And yet you heard ABC not asking any of those questions. You heard and certainly the economy didn't even come up in the debate, barely once. There was one segment on it very quickly, which, by the way, the Democrats have realized this is a huge problem for them, because while they realized that I think for a lot of the Democrats, I think for a lot of liberals, they had fun watching the debate. They had fun watching Donald Trump getting pummeled and fact checked and hit from all sides. But when it really comes down to it, they were just preaching to the choir, because if you're an undecided voter, again, go back to the calculus, 100,000 votes in 5 or 6 states is all we're really talking about here. And if you're someone who's on the fence, you've already made up your decision about whether or not you like Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. What you're looking for is typically those voters are the type of voters that vote on economic issues. To put it in more simple terms, they vote with their wallets. They vote with who they think is going to put more money in their pocket, who's going to bring more to the kitchen table, who's going to do more for their families. And unfortunately for them, Kamala Harris didn't talk about any of those things throughout this debate. She said she didn't like Trump. She didn't like his statement. She didn't like his character, et cetera, et cetera. But all of those things have been litigated in the press for over 10 years. What she didn't do was miss the opportunity to actually introduce herself to a national audience with 67 million people tuning in. It was the largest, I believe, event that she's ever done. It was the largest opportunity she had to really introduce herself as a candidate. And she didn't do that. She stood as the I'm not Donald Trump candidate. And unfortunately, I think we're starting to find that wasn't helpful for her with these undecided voters.
Yeah, I saw some poll that I think speaks to what you just mentioned, Jack, where it said something like, 5 or 7% of the people need to learn more about Donald Trump, where I was like 28% or something need to learn more about Harris in order to make a decision. And I don't think that's really compressed much. So like you said, there's still these people that really don't know what she stands for. And I guess you're saying that will really affect those crucial independent voters in those 6 counties that really matter.
How do you get out of a rat race? How do you create wealth not only for yourself, but also for the generations to come after?
I am absolutely amazed with the quality of companies that we're getting exposure to.
We go on to Zoom calls with the innovators and the folks who are building new applications in metaverse, blockchain, artificial intelligence, decentralized finance.
What's going on, everybody? Thumbs up if you can see me.
We are focusing on early stage investment.
And the quality of people that we're getting exposure to, whether it be Dan Tapiero with 1RT, Jason Ma from Open, Yatsu from Animoca.
It's been a phenomenal experience thus far. It has far exceeded my expectations.
We are focusing on cutting edge technologies.
I view it now as the best investment I've ever made. The upside, I view, is unlimited.
And as a retail investor, I would never get this exposure anywhere else outside of Investment Club.
See you in the Investment Club.
Precisely, because if you're someone who really does care about the economy, you know that the economy right now, as you mentioned, is not doing well. It's certainly not doing well for those people. If you're someone in one of these towns that's been flooded by third world migrants, you're asking what relief is there for us, if any. And of course, by the way, you know that she is the current sitting incumbent. And one of the biggest missed opportunities, I think, even for the Democrats, and in my critique of their performance, that they didn't even acknowledge that she's the one in office. They didn't acknowledge that the person who was at the last debate is no longer here, that she is now in. There's no acknowledgement of why that happened. And I think that for a lot of those people who are imagine, if you will, you're someone who doesn't pay attention to politics every day. And I know people like you and me, and people listening to the show, we're like the 1% of the 1% when it comes to high information. But if you're someone out there who is a low information voter, okay, there's an election coming up, you've heard that Joe Biden isn't running anymore, you want to tune into the next debate, and you're confused. Why is this person running? She hasn't explained why she's running. What happened to the guy who was here on the last episode of the show? If you look at it that way, they're not there. You have no idea who this person is. And all you can seem to iterate from this video is that she doesn't like Donald Trump. Well, okay, fine. But what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for my family? And the piece that resonates with you the most, of course, is the closing statements. Both closing statements have both been posted on TikTok by the opposing campaigns, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump's. Donald Trump's, I believe the last count I saw, has been viewed 10 times more than hers has. So it's absolutely viral. And what did he say? He said, if you could do all of these wonderful things, why haven't you done them already? Because you're in office right now. So you don't get to sit there and say you will promise all of these things when you get in office. You're in office. Your day one was 4 years ago. And that's an extremely effective campaign talking point, because you mentioned 2020 a minute ago. Look, I think people looking back on COVID, voters in general, and something that I've just found running through American politics, voters don't blame Donald Trump for COVID. They don't. They blame it on a lot of different things, but they don't necessarily blame it on him. They remember it was the governors that locked him down, not him. They remember it was the pharma companies that lied about the vaccines, not him. They remember that it was the Chinese Communist Party that created the Wuhan lab to begin with. And they remember that Anthony Fauci was the one who lied about providing the funding and the research for it. So they remember all of those things. And the other thing that they remember, by the way, was that when you take COVID out of the picture, things in the United States were actually going back on the right track. Prior to COVID, if you went back and looked at the polls in early 2020, late 2019, Donald Trump was a shoo-in for re-election, mostly predicated on the economy. And again, I've been quoting Democrats a lot today, and I'll quote another one, the great James Carville, all the way back in 1992. It's the economy, stupid. There are so many voters that just want a better economy, because that is the thing that, for right or wrong, when a politician in his office, and specifically presidents, that is the one who gets the accolades, gets the blame, gets credit or the blame for the state of the economy. If the economy is strong, you get reelected. If the economy is not, you don't get reelected.
I hope the American voters wake up and see it, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that one of the candidates clearly favors, promoting the economy, from hiring Elon to cut all the fat out of the government, to not having a unrealized capital gains tax. I mean, I guess the average voter doesn't understand that, but if they could, it would shock them. I think it would make them vote right away for Trump. The way I would say you have to, the way you do it, explain. So when I first started working in politics, somebody once explained it to me like this. They said, the best political argument is one that you can make over a loud bar. So you've got to be able to make it someone in a loud bar. So if I say unrealized capital gains tax, that's not going to pass the bar test. But what would pass the bar test? She's going to tax you on money that you don't even have yet. She's going to tax you on money that you don't even have yet. What does that mean? That means that you've got a tax burden that effectively has no cap. It has no ceiling. So your tax burden then could come in on whatever the IRS says it is. And look, everybody kind of knows in the United States that you're already kind of playing a guessing game as it is when you go to the IRS, because you're never really sure exactly. And the accountant gives you a number and you file it and you hope that the IRS doesn't respond. Now, suddenly they're going to be looking to extract as much rents from you, as many rents from you as they possibly can, exact as much tax revenue. And again, taxing you on money that you haven't even made yet is something that is an extremely effective way of getting that across. One of the things that came up in the debate was the immigrants eating cats, and of course Donald got fact checked right away and silenced. And then I opened up X today, and they got body cam footage, and it's all about this Haitian invasion, and apparently they have all the video proof. What do you make of that, and how bad is this invasion?
Well, it's a very interesting situation, because it gives you an intrinsic look at how the liberal mind works. And specifically when I think of ABC's anchors, David Muir and Lindsay Davis, their fact check was, we reached out to the city manager of Springfield, and he said that it's not happening, or I believe it's the exact quote was, there were no credible reports. And said, oh, great. So you reached out to a nameless, there's no name given, a nameless bureaucrat, someone who, as a city manager, is generally an appointed title. That's not the mayor, that's not a city councilman. So you reached out to a nameless bureaucrat. The bureaucrat has given you a statement, and you're responding with that statement as if that's true. So there's no information of, and by the way, you mentioned going and looking at X. Well, what are people doing now? There's people there. My brother is actually in Springfield, Ohio right now, collecting some videos. They're talking to the people. They're walking around on the streets, talking to people that are dealing with, again, in a town of 60,000 people, 20,000 Haitian migrants from a completely foreign community, from a completely foreign culture, completely foreign civilization, completely different standard of living, completely different way of living. Many of whom don't even speak English, are imported to your town. And they really mean to tell us that there's been no problem whatsoever, and they're all just there to work. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face. And so, yes, we've seen from the videos, not just these questions of cats and dogs and ducks and geese going missing. By the way, if go and look at any documentary on Haiti, and you'll see there's one of the reasons that Haiti does not have as much wildlife. Partially it's deforestation, and partially it's due to overhunting, because they don't manage the populations of wildlife there. They simply hunt everything to extinction. Again, this is something that if you're managing hunting, you would intrinsically know. Like, for example, deer in Ohio or Pennsylvania, you have to manage the population. They're not doing that. They just hunt everything and track it down and kill it and eat it. You also have a situation in Springfield where The insurance rates are going through the roof for citizens because the amount of accidents and the amount of risk has gone up because you have so many people that aren't familiar with U.S. driving laws, U.S. driving customs, that are crashing, cars that are incinerated, cars that are flipped. And of course, we had this horrific situation last year where on the very first day of school, a school bus was hit by not just an Haitian migrant, but actually an illegal migrant, someone who was caught and released under the Harris-Biden policies down at the border, crashed into a school bus without a license, and killed an 11-year-old boy on the very first day of school. And yet, according to David Muir, well, that's shouldn't even think about that. Who cares about that kind of stuff going on? Well, no, actually, I think a lot of Americans do care about that sort of thing. And of course, President Trump, in bringing it up in the way that he does, he uses the power of imagery, and he uses the power of painting pictures with words to break. If I just talked about this in terms of housing or in terms of the economic impact and pointing out that they're taking jobs or pointing out that federal subsidies are going to these migrants so that they can take jobs and housing from American citizens, that's one level of understanding, but he uses the power of imagery, as he always has, going back to those 2015 speeches, that it really gets inside your head and resonates with you to the point, while you and I and the entire rest of the media are fired up about this controversy, we're repeating what he said over and over and over. And the psychological tactic there, and you mentioned how I served at Guantanamo, the psychological tactic there is, of course, the picture is going in our heads over and over every time we mention it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the media and maybe the elite criticize his speeches. I just listen to most of his speeches, and there's a lot of repetition, but he's talking to the common person, I think, and he's doing a lot of what you said. And so, who cares what these other people think, because they're not the one that actually elected him anyways, and so I think he ultimately does know what he's doing, or he has an innate sense of how to communicate to the people that are important. And I guess he's just executing that plan at this point.
Well, I think that's right. And there was even some communications linguistics analysis done in 2016 where someone actually took the bias out and came in and said, the way that he communicates I mentioned the bar test just a minute ago, and that's exactly what he passes every single time. He intrinsically knows that you can't just throw numbers and statistics at people, even though he understands them. And by the way, if you've ever, they never released the videos of this, but when he was doing his deposition regarding the Trump organization, this was back in the New York civil case that was held last year, and he was talking about his businesses, and you can read the transcript. He knows all the facts and figures off the top of his head. He knows the valuation, he knows potential valuation, he knows all of these things, and he was walking through property after property after property of his own businesses. But of course, he doesn't talk about that stuff or doesn't talk that way when he's in the setting of one of these public rallies, because at a public rally, the idea is to take these concepts and explain it in a way to people that, number one, is motivating, and number two, is descriptive, and number three, of course, obviously, he is trying to win elected office, and he's doing so in such a way. And this is one of the things they really hate. And you mentioned the difference between the RNC and the DNC, and I'll tell you what the biggest difference was. At the DNC, you get a lot of flowery, like Aaron Sorkin-ish, West Wing kind of language. We are going to move forward. We aren't going to have the politics of the past. We're going to have the politics of the future. And it's very well scripted, and it's, the phrases are very nice, but there's no substance to it. It's all empty calories. There's never any actual explanation of what these wonderful policies are. It's just sort of these abstractions of forward, joy, change. Whereas when you go to the RNC, he's telling stories. He's getting into exact details about the situation and it's when they are. He's telling you, he's walking you through stories of crime, horrific stories of crime, migrant crime. In some cases, he's got the family members that have been affected by this. He's there in attendance, and in many cases, they are on stage. He put the families of Abby Gate on stage. He, of course, went to the memorial recently. So again, he's talking about specific substantive issues. And one thing that I've always thought is kind of ironic is one of the reasons that the elite in the United States actually hate him so much isn't because of his stance on the issues, it's because he actually talks about the issues.
The investment club gives us a chance to think about what wealth really is, and having the resources to have the freedom to live your life that you want. It was a whole new world for me to hear about cryptocurrency, an alternative to the traditional banking system that we have. In just 1 month that I've been a part of the investment club, I have listen to so many visionaries with new ideas in the world of music, in the world of finance, in the world of artificial intelligence. When I have questions, there's members of the club willing to support and help and want to see one another gain experience and knowledge. So joining the investment club can bring you the opportunity for peace of mind, wealth, resources, community, and a more joyful time.
First of all, I think he's rewritten the book on public speaking. And I think maybe another reason the elite don't like him is because, he shows them that maybe all of that, that fancy prose is not actually what's needed sometimes. It's like making a human connection. And his impromptuness is just amazing. It's amazing to watch. It's a masterclass. And even him on stage at that RNC when he went and kissed the helmet, of Corey. I mean,
Look, we were in the room when the Corey Compatore situation happened, and or I should say the memorial to Corey happened, when the entire stage turned white, and you couldn't really see it on TV as it was in the room, and it was just this blinding white light came out, and Trump standing there, and then all of a sudden you see this something appears on stage right, and you're looking and say, what is that? And you couldn't quite tell at first, and I'm not that far back, but the light was so bright that you couldn't quite see it, so it was silhouetted by the light behind it. And as the light faded, I think they did this on purpose, they blinded the audience and then they faded it down, and it was almost as it came into relief, you realized it was a fireman's helmet and a fireman's jacket standing on a pole. And it was evocative, of course, of the way that when a veteran or when a soldier passes, they usually put the helmet and the rifle on top of the boots. It was very evocative of one of those displays. And even before I could read the name, everybody realized what it was, and everyone realized what it represented. And then when you do read the name and suddenly realize, hey, this isn't a symbol, this is the real one, this is actually his. I mean, just looking around, and myself included, there was not a dry eye in the audience when we saw that, because this was a man, Corey Compatore, and in all of the conversation about the elections and all of the conversation, even about the Trump assassination attempt, that it really seems to have gotten lost by the wayside, that in the midst of this political season, an innocent man who was attending a political rally in my home state of Pennsylvania, was there with his wife and his daughter, and he was murdered. He wasn't just the victim of some accident. He wasn't the victim of some random happenstance that took place. He was murdered simply for attending that rally. And when he was shot and killed, he was doing so while draping his body over his wife and his daughter. And in fact, I believe his wife said that his last words were, "Get down." And he got in the way of them and took a bullet for his family. And to see something like that, and all of the just incredible things that happen on that very day, it really does a disservice to us as a people to take the politics out of it and just realize that these were incredibly historic events. And yet at the debate, when President Trump is the only one who brought it up, David Muir cuts him off and says, "Oh, we've got more things we need to get to."
Well, let's talk about that day, because you've written a book about that day. And like you said, the media cycle is so short or ruthless, or I don't know what it is, but it's almost like everyone's forgot that.
What's a decision?
It's incredible. It's like, what have you done for us lately? And it was such an epic day. It was such an epic event. It was such a tragedy that happened to anybody, any presidential candidate. And then obviously his reaction is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. You wrote an entire book about that. That's serious. And it's not like you're not a busy guy. Why did you decide to do that?
Well,
and what did you do? What did you uncover?
Well, so the book, and thank you, the book is Bulletproof: How a Shot Meant for Donald Trump Took Out Joe Biden. It comes out October 22nd, so it comes out before the election. It is the first book written on the Trump assassination, and the only book that comes out before the election. Look, I didn't intend to write this book. I had no plan to write this book. It's the idea of writing 2 books in 1 year is kind of insane. And, but at the same time, I don't think any of us realized that all of this would happen in 1 year. And so the only response that I could think of was to put it all down on paper to become sort of that first draft of history, but also because of the fact that, as you say, the corporate media has decided to completely take this story out of the cycle. And corporate media's greatest power, their greatest power isn't the fact check. Their greatest power isn't actually their bias. Their greatest power is story selection. And what do I mean by this? In story selection, it is they can control what you talk about and what you don't talk about. And if they want to omit something, they can erase it completely. And that's exactly what's been done with the two events that we saw in those 9 days in July, from July 13th all the way up to the day that Joe Biden drops out of office. These events are inextricably and indelibly linked. And if you don't understand that, then you can't actually understand the system under which we live. And we make the case because when you just go back and look at the timing, from a political and geopolitical sense, Donald Trump had yet to name his vice president on that day. Remember, he doesn't name J.D. Vance until the Monday after the 13th. So he names J.D. on the 15th. And in the book, by the way, we go through day by day. So the days prior, the days during, and the days after. We actually give a day by day, step by step, recreated in parallel timeline of events of Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and the shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks. And in all of this, so we just go back to the timing. Donald Trump hasn't named his VP yet, and the RNC hasn't happened yet. This is the weekend prior. So if, say, hypothetically, you wanted to change the entire makeup of the RNC candidacy, if you wanted to end Trumpism, if you were someone who stood for, as I was talking about before, the collective West, if you were someone who perhaps had a bone to pick with the state of Iran, if you were someone who wanted endless war, this was the perfect opportunity and truly the last moment that you had to be able to stop all of this and then shape your own narrative going forward. Because had that bullet been one inch to the right, Donald Trump would not be the vice presidential candidate. J.D. Vance would not be the vice presidential candidate. You probably would have seen an open convention. The convention would have come down to, and we go through these scenarios in the book, it would have come down to essentially Nikki Haley versus Donald Trump Jr. And there would have been a massive pitch to put Nikki Haley on the ticket. And remember, Nikki Haley at this point, who is someone that's totally in part of the neoconservative project. She is totally part of the collective West project. She absolutely views America's role in the world exactly the same as how Kamala Harris apparently now views America's role in the world. You notice Kamala Harris has eschewed all of her woke talking points, her leftist talking points. There's no more defund the police. There's no more BLM. And suddenly it's America needs to be the world leader. America needs to stand up for our alliances. America needs to spread democracy around the world. And I'm scratching my head saying, wait a minute, I've heard these things before, but I've never heard that from Kamala Harris. She's always been a candidate of the left. It feels like someone's going in and flipped whoever has changed the teleprompter that she's reading off of. Someone more powerful has come in and put it there. So yes, you would have had Nikki Haley essentially installed as the Republican candidate, or perhaps a very strong push to do so in order to reshape American politics and America's standing in the world. So remember, going back to 2016, it was supposed to be Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton. The ruling class, the ruling establishment will give you this sort of very tight choice. It's sort of a false choice on the Overton window of candidates. There's the candidate of Jeb, the candidate of Hillary. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat, but both are members of extremely high-powered and connected political families. They're both members of political dynasties. They both stand for essentially the same things when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to finance, when it comes to borders and migration, when it comes to all of these things, they stand for the same issues. There's a few social issues with which they will contend about, and typically Hillary Clinton would be for further progress, and Jeb Bush would just be for slower progress. But on the main issues, and the bulk 80% of issues, they are in lockstep. That's the kind of politics that the uniparty, the ruling class in Washington, D.C. and London wanted to have returned. With Donald Trump and his merry band of pirates that have come together and totally uprooted that entire system. And so going back to the events of July 13, again, I'm not putting complicity on Nikki Haley or any of the people that I've just mentioned, but I will note that from a hypothetical perspective, that if you have to ask in these situations, and I say this as a prior intelligence officer, cui bono, cui malo, who benefits and who suffers.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.
Hey, I know investing in crypto is scary. It takes a real leap of faith because there are so many scams, rug pulls, and bad actors out there. It's a dangerous business, which is why 95% of people lose all their money. Well, that's why I created the London Real Investment Club, so you can access the hottest deals on the planet and use the crypto bull market to create the generational wealth that you deserve. Join my team of over 100 people from around the world that are making millions of dollars behind the scenes investing in blockchain, AI, Web3 games, DeFi, Bitcoin, and more. Don't miss out. Click the link below to book a call with one of my team now. But hurry, this bull market will end soon.
I know investing in crypto can be scary. That's why you gotta join the investment club. Pull the trigger. Let's do this.